Hello, all. My name is Lexi, and I enjoy helping others navigate really difficult conversations, but I find myself really struggling with having the difficult conversation with myself. I've been in therapy for a lot of years, especially on and off, but more recently, I have spent a lot more time on in therapy. And the other day, I was having a conversation with some friends, and it kind of triggered this idea for this video segment. This definitely isn't where I had planned for a lot of my normal content to go, but I really like this idea and I kind of want to run with it. We'll see where it ends up. I kind of wanted to take the time to kind of use my space to kind of have difficult conversations with myself and just kind of see what happens with it. And this same text conversation that I was having with my friends that triggered the idea has also triggered the topic for today. So the topic for today is we're gonna have a hard conversation with myself about my relationship with my father. Now, I'm gonna have to give some background information when it comes to my dad, just because, or not just my dad, but kind of my childhood, I think, to better understand how kind of where this all comes into play and kind of just where I'm trying to go with it. So for a little bit of context, my parents are divorced. My parents have been divorced since a little bit before I was born, so I never lived in a household with both of my parents. My dad was not absent from my life, but if someone were to ask me, I definitely would say that I grew up in a single parent household. I lived predominantly with my mom, and I would visit my dad. And but my dad was very much involved in my life, never not a part of my life. This is probably also a really good place to disclaimer to my parents. If you guys are listening, listen to the whole thing. This isn't I think how most parents or how most people think therapy bashes their parents and is oh, you're like this because of your mom and because of your dad, and you can't be in a successful relationship because of your daddy issues. And I mean, there's some truth to it, but there's also more to the story. So if my parents or any family members are listening, listen to the end so you can kind of hear where I'm going with this. In addition to my parents being divorced, my dad remarried my stepmom when I was pretty young. A lot of my core memories, a lot of things I look back on, my stepmom was definitely there as well. And I think about when I was about 6, my first sister was born. And then I think when I was about 11, my youngest sister was born. So my dad definitely had a lot of people to take care of. And there definitely was a distinction between my house and my dad's house. It was a very different dynamic. I think it's really important, especially as I've gotten older and as I think about things, because the household was just really different than what I was used to coming from a single parent household. And that also thinks about things of income, resources, who's there to help, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of painting the scene. Some additional kind of context is my preteen and my teen years were really rough. I had a pretty traumatic event happen in my middle school years that really set the course for kind of my relationship with my dad, my relationship with others, and just kind of, honestly, really my relationship with myself. I don't think now is the time to bring that up, but I believe that it could be a future segment on this episode. So, or on this genre idea that I have. In having that experience happen, in making my childhood and making my preteens and my teens really tough, I was really angsty. I was very angsty, but I didn't want to lash out the way that typical people would lash out in that situation. I was really aware, and I was oh, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. But I was low key becoming that person. I think at that moment, probably in my middle school to high school years, is really when I subscribed to the belief that my parents were the reason for essentially my suffering. It sounds really dramatic, but I was absolutely that dramatic as a teenager. So I believe that. And then that turned into that my dad wanted me to be perfect And in order for my dad to be proud or to love me, I needed to be perfect. And I believe that those are probably the years where like that idea, not only did I subscribe to it, but I really planted it and I let that idea grow. Now let's fast forward to more recently in this group text that I was talking about. So in the group text, a friend of mine was talking about how they were with family and how the family members were like watching the Masters. So that's like the Super Bowl of golf, if you don't know, and how their family was like rewinding and watching the same parts, and it had been like 6 hours. And it had reminded me of when my dad bought me golf clubs, and I think he even got me lessons. I'm like 99% sure there were also some golfing lessons, and he really wanted me to like basically become the next Tiger Woods. And in addition to golf was just one of the many activities, but it made me then think about all the other activities that my dad signed me up for. Gymnastics, I think I did ballet, basketball, soccer, softball, I can't fully remember, but it was a lot. Tennis was a big one because Venus and Serena. And I remember that he would always put me in them and make me do them and be like, if I worked hard and I did practice every single day and I did all these things, I could be the next insert famous female athlete name here. That's why I distinctly remember Venus and Serena Williams for tennis, because they're always hot shit, but I feel like as a kid, they were like one of the first like black women pro athletes that really were like the fucking bomb. So that's where we were. I shared that in the group chat, and that I had thought that and then I had like a real big like adult realization of, as a kid, I had thought that he wanted me to do those things because he wanted me to be perfect. When now I look at it, I realize he just saw so much potential in me, and something about that like broke me down. I like kind of started to cry because I was like, I had never said out loud that my dad has seen so much potential in me, and that's why he did the things that he did. I simply saw it as he wanted a perfect daughter. He wanted a Venus and Serena. He wanted, I think Mia Hamm was really big in soccer when I was like a kid. He wanted like the next female Tiger Woods, and I felt bad because I wasn't going to be them. Like, I knew right off the bat, like, I don't think it mattered how hard I tried or how much I did anything, like, that just wasn't going to happen. And so, in that moment of that group text, I was able to kind of just sit there, and I was like, wow, I'm still really holding on to some of the hurt that little Lexi experienced when it came to my dad. So then my whole plan was, I'm going to kind of like jot these feelings down. I'm going to journal about them. I'm going to feel them because as a lot of you who are also in therapy know, you're supposed to feel the feelings. You're not just supposed to analyze them or really like just think about and analyze and explain why you feel how you feel and then move on. You're supposed to actually feel them. You're supposed to feel gross. You're supposed to hate it and just sit in a really nasty place. I think this is also probably a really great disclaimer. I'm probably going to cry a little bit. So excuse my ugly Kim Kardashian cry. So as I kind of sat down to kind of start journaling about some of these feelings, I kind of thought, and I got this idea of kind of this segment about having hard conversations with myself. Because I think also, if not in that same group chat, it may have been a work group chat that I have, where I was kind of giving some information about having difficult conversations. If you've ever worked with me, you'll know that my life was seriously changed in the workplace by reading the book Crucial Conversations. Shout out to my manager at Houzz for encouraging me to look at some of the core competencies of Houzz, and I read that book because it changed me professionally 1,000,000%. So anyways, I was having that conversation and I was like, wow, it's so easy for me to give advice as far as having hard conversations, you know, about going to therapy, about doing the work and all this other kind of stuff. But like, here I am sitting here not practicing what I preach and not really thinking about some of the feelings that I have when it comes to my dad. Well, some of my feelings that I have in general that I just don't really talk about because it's hard and it's easier to assign things to other people than it is to assign to yourself. So with that, As I mentioned, I was sitting there getting ready to journal, and then I said, let's make this video form and let's see what fucking happens. So when I journal, I keep a jar, or it's kind of more like, it's more of like a bank, like a journaling prompt bank of questions that I think I should ask myself. And it's usually to help give me kind of like guidance and direction. So I'm actually kind of thinking about the feeling, and I'm actually kind of sticking to something versus just writing. Because sometimes like I'll write and then I'll end up all the way out in fucking Narnia before I get to the whole point of what I'm talking about. So I pulled out some of the questions from my journal bank, and I'm going to answer them here to kind of maybe help guide me through some of the feelings. So you'll probably see me reading, and it's because I pulled those out of the bank, and I jotted down just some quick things that I thought of as I read that question. So the first question, I think like this one was a biggie. The universe was really trying to fucking get my attention here. And that's, what do you think, or what do I think I will gain by addressing this story that I've assigned to my relationship with my dad? Oh, oh man. And here's some of the things. Like I said, I jotted down some like bullet points to kind of help keep my feelings on track. Also to kind of help avoid the tears. I would prefer not to cry. But in thinking about that question, I would have to say some of the things I think I will gain is, one, I've built up a lot of barriers when it comes to not just my dad, but like with my stepmom and my sisters, because it just was easier to build up a barrier than it was to feel hurt and to admit my hurt. I think that also by addressing it, it's gonna have to make me kind of look at, why am I not proud of myself? Because assigning that my dad isn't proud to me is way easier than assigning, oh no, I'm just not proud of myself. And that's an even deeper question of, well, why am I not proud of the things that I've done? How could I not be proud of myself? I think it's also a really good reminder to me that people aren't always going to show love or show how proud they are the way that I want them to, or the way that I think is the right way to show how proud or how much you love someone. But it doesn't take away from the fact that they do care. You know, my dad and I are very different. We grew up very differently, and I am a lot more sensitive than he is. But that doesn't take away from the fact that my dad loves me or that he cares about me. It's just, we do it differently. Bryce and I have a saying where no one here is wrong, we just would do things differently. And that's a great example of this. I think that also, in bringing down some of the barriers, I think it would allow for me to just really enjoy the years that I have with him, and that the years that I spent being upset, I can kind of get some of that time back. Because it's just no real fault, it's just, life. I think that it would allow me to regain a lot of those years and regain relationships with my family, because in putting up those barriers, it blocked out relationships with my stepmom, my sisters, my grandma on my dad's side, my aunts and uncles on my dad's side, just because it was way easier to stay closed off than to actually admit how I felt. The next question was also kind of a doozy. It was, do I think my dad is proud of me? So the quick answer is yes, I do. When I first read the question, I absolutely went with, oh, my dad is absolutely proud of today, Lexi, like the Lexi you're seeing right now. And I had to really think about that, because my dad is proud of me, and I think my dad has always been proud of me. I just wasn't proud of myself, and I've done a lot of things that I'm just not like obviously I'm not proud of, but there are things that I'm still working on to forgive myself, that I'm forgetting that I can't just assume that my dad is going to feel a certain way because I feel a certain way. That's a me thing. That's something I'm assigning to others, again, because it's easier to have my dad not be proud than to admit that I'm not proud of myself. And those are very different things. So the long and short answer is I think my dad is really proud of me. It feels really weird to say that, but I do believe it. I think in everything that I do and that I have done, even the times where I've really messed up, I think he's been really proud that, like, one, I can admit the times that I've messed up, but also kind of come out on the other side of, like, just not being a completely shitty person. Okay, let's look at this next question. Oh, what would I tell young Lexi about my dad? Oh, this one was also kind of tough. But some of the notes that I kind of jotted down for myself were, I would number one say that he's human and that kids don't come with an instruction manual. Looking back on it now, I realize my dad took care of 3 households and probably more, because he took care of his home, my home with my mom, and he helped out his mother as well and other family members. And that's not easy. He took care of them financially, emotionally, and, you know, he had a pretty taxing job. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, there weren't things that he could have done better, because absolutely we all could do better, but I would tell myself, like, he's taking care of a lot of people right now, and that all the reasons that I think that he doesn't care are the exact opposite. He cares so much, and to just really not believe everything you see and hear on TV and in movies, because it's going to set you up. It's going to set your expectations to never be met. Just like any rom-com, I would also tell myself, like, no relationship is like a rom-com, and if it is, it's a scam. And that you're going to learn as you get older. A lot of the time as an adult, you don't get things that are good for you and things that are fun. Like, they're not usually the same. If anything, the things that are good for you aren't easy. And that's really what my dad had to do most of my life. They weren't easy, but they were for the greater good. And I didn't see that because obviously I was a kid, and to me, if it didn't feel good or if it wasn't fun, then it wasn't good for me. I would also tell, like, you know, young Lexi, work on forgiving sooner. Not just to make my dad, I think, feel better, but to help me feel better. You know, it's kind of like, you know, when they talk about, you know, the thing about, like, what is it, revenge or like hating someone or something like that. It's like you're drinking the poison. It's like you want them to drink the poison, but you're just doing it to yourself. And that's probably the other, like, lesson I would really hammer in. I would also say that for some of the things that happened to me that were traumatic, it was nobody's fault but the person who did those things. And there's no right way to move forward. It's just to move forward. And then I only did 4 questions because I felt like if I did more than 4, I would be bawling and it would just drag on. And I have it as, if I could change an interaction between myself and my dad, which would it be? I had already thought about this situation earlier in the questions. In one of the questions I had answered, when I pulled this one, and it was there was a time when I was still living in LA and I had a medical issue that required emergency surgery. I told both of my parents, I told them as it was happening because I didn't know what was going on. It was a weird time. I was kind of in between jobs. Well, I had like quit one job, started another one, but it was really bad. And then I was like, I'm going to need this emergency surgery to like figure shit out. Well, not to figure shit out. I was going to need the surgery to fix the shit that was wrong with me. And then I was going to need time to recover, which I was going to use then to figure out if I was going back to this toxic as fuck job. And I fought both my parents and told them, do not come up to LA. At the time, my mom had already moved to Phoenix. My dad was still in San Diego. If I could change an interaction, it would be that one. And I would have asked for him to come up. I had a lot of shame about like needing help or like just the situation. And it was easier to convince my parents that I was okay than to tell them like I'm full of shame. And at the time I wouldn't have been able to coin the term because I didn't fully understand the difference between like shame and guilt. And I felt really guilty about it, but in fact I was shameful. I was full of shame and I didn't want anyone else to wallow in my shame but me. But I wish I could have done that differently because I really needed help. My friends were definitely there and they definitely supported me, but I really needed some help. And I think that if that had played out a little differently, I think I would have had been better adjusted moving to Phoenix. There was a lot of like, I kind of want to go with like resentment and shame in moving to Phoenix. And I think if this situation had played differently, I would have been okay, or I would have been better adjusted in moving to Phoenix. I think I still would have moved to Phoenix. I might have even moved back to San Diego with my dad. I probably would have felt more comfortable versus moving to Phoenix. I mean, I'm grateful for how things played out. I mean, obviously, Phoenix has been really good to me, but I think that would have played a really important role in some of the healing that I needed to do. Those were kind of tough, but I did way better than I thought with crying. I definitely cried typing out the notes and like kind of coming up with my like outline for the idea, but it was like, I'm really proud of myself. And with that being said, this was kind of challenging to do and it's kind of weird, and we'll see how this gets put on the internet because that's a whole nother story than me sitting here and recording it. Those are two very different things. But I just kind of think it's so easy to look at feelings we have and say that someone else feels them versus how we actually feel, because then getting inside of ourselves is like a whole different enchilada and like a whole different like set of feelings. And we have to admit that like we may be wrong, or that like our thinking is flawed, and like we already feel shitty about the situation. The last thing we want to do is also admit that we're wrong, I definitely also think I have a lot more to like obviously work through with the situation in regards to my dad. I think I really need to kind of look at like the shame I have for kind of closing off my dad and closing off that part of my family. I definitely treated my feelings more like a gangrene limb versus a broken bone. I needed support, like a cast. I needed time for it to heal, like a bone to fuse back together. But I think time is the hardest part of healing. No one wants to feel shitty for long. I would love it. Anybody here who enjoys feeling shitty for a long time, please leave a comment, DM me, because I have so many fucking questions, because that's the worst part of the healing process. I don't want to feel shitty for a long time. So cutting it off and deeming it gross and unsalvageable is so much easier, or it seems to be so much easier. But it's really not until after you cut it off and you realize that, wow, I really needed that limb, or like, I wish I had tried, or like, I could have tried and I could have saved this is when you're like, fuck, I really needed this. You know, as I said, I have a lot of shame around my relationship with my dad, my stepmom, and my sisters. It's like an elephant in the room whenever I talk to them or my dad sends out a text message with all of us in it. Or the times I acknowledge to my fiance that like my dad is trying so hard. And I know that like he just wants his whole family together. And I don't, because of my shame and my embarrassment, I put up that, oh, it's them, they don't reach out, they don't do that. And that's just not true. I know that the time I have with him now, it's not forever. And I think about my friends who've lost a parent. I have a friend who recently lost a parent. And I don't want, when that time comes, to regret that something like my shame prevented us from really enjoying these years. I'm not gonna say these last few years because I don't know when he's gonna pass. I don't know that. If I knew when everyone was gonna pass, I'd probably make a lot more money, but that's another story for a different day. I don't want the time that we have to be these silly moments of shame that I'm creating, and that I just need to feel uncomfortable for a little while to move through so we can enjoy our time. I don't ever want him to think that I don't love him or that I'm not proud of him for the life that he's lived. And I think raising 3 daughters is probably pretty tough. I'm not a parent, but I imagine having 3 daughters is pretty tough. Especially growing up during the age of the internet. I can't even imagine. This was definitely, like I said, tough. But something about sharing some unhealed trauma or some trauma I'm trying to work through with an unknown number of strangers, I think has made it a little bit easier to have the discussion with myself. And to continue the conversation and to bring it up in therapy, because my therapist and I, we always can find something to chit chat about, and this seems like a really good thing to chit chat about. We'll see kind of how this plays out, and we'll see where this takes me, and if there's some more episodes to come, because I have plenty of other really difficult conversations I need to have with myself that I've just been putting on the back burner. So thanks for sitting and talking with me while I talk to myself and crying with me. And we'll see how this all plays out.